School trips are expensive, especially in private schools. And I know you're used to the public school costs. It's pointless for you to try and afford to go. No worries, I'll bring you a souvenir. My daughter's homeroom teacher is blunt, and his tone is belittling. It's not right to belittle or dismiss anyone, especially a teacher to a student. My name is Natalie. My brother and I lost our parents in a fatal car accident when we were young. I was 8 and my brother was 15. When they passed, the rest of the family was left to figure out what to do with us. Our parents didn't have a lot of family, and no one was financially stable or secure enough to take us both in. We can't take them both in because we can barely raise one. We already have 2 kids ourselves. Double the kids? No way. So we realized that all we had in this life now was each other. I was only in 3rd grade. I clung to my brother hard. I was constantly crying. My brother was upset that he couldn't fix the things that I was going through. At 15, he's barely an adult and barely a kid. He could only do so much. One relative finally agreed to take me in. I'm sorry we can't have the both of you here with us, but we figured one of you could stay here and the other would have to stay in a foster home or a shelter. I understood the situation, but I thought separating us was only going to make things worse. Please look after her. I'll take the foster home. My brother insisted. He had no problem sacrificing that for me. Hey, I'll be fine. Just because I'll be in foster care, it doesn't mean that I won't be well taken care of. He was holding my hand tight and assured me that I deserve this, that he wants this for me. I felt the warmth in his hand, and before I knew it, I was crying and begging him to stay. The family that took me in must not have been too excited because it always felt like I was a stranger living in their home, like there was an unspoken divide between us. I felt alone. The shelter that my brother ended up residing in was far. The long distance was hard, but we kept in contact by talking to each other on the phone when we could. I know that I was living with my family, but to me, the only family that I had was my brother. But my brother wasn't there. So the feeling of loneliness started to grow. I've always been very empathetic and intuitive by nature. I love to pick up on what I feel and free my mind and be creative with my outlets. The more that feeling of isolation grew, the stronger my emotions became. It led to me shutting the world out and staying inside of my little shell. As I went through middle school and high school, the feeling of loneliness continued to follow me. I started to write my feelings out on paper. I started to create exciting stories, and it came to me naturally. Eventually, I showed my brother some of my writing. He complimented my work and told me that I should continue to write and encouraged me to do so, that this was something special. After I graduated, I immediately started to look for work. As an avid reader, I managed to find a job at a small publishing company for literary magazines. If the company was any bigger, I would not have applied. Not because I'm not qualified, but because it wouldn't have been the right fit for me. I pour my entire heart into my writing. I'm pretty obsessed, and I wanted to repay my family that took me in and reassure my brother that I'm okay. It was hard at first, transitioning into my first job and then learning from my mistakes, but I continued my best. And then before I knew it, I was there for 5 years. At the time, I was working in the editorial department for one of the main writers. This writer had great potential for the company and even won a recognition award for his work. As the editor in charge, I tried my absolute best to help him. When he got stuck with a concept, I offered him some of my creative insights and feedback. I have no idea what I'd do without that creative intellect of yours, Natalie. Receiving that approval and praise from your boss as an editor felt amazing. We were really close and formed a solid bond with our work relationship. And so then it led him to, Natalie, you are the perfect partner at my work. I know you are the most perfect partner in my life. Will you marry me? When he asked, I was completely taken off guard. It was so unexpected, especially since we aren't even openly dating or romantically involved. I mean, given the close working relationship, we do know a lot and enough about each other. So I decided, Yes, I want to be with you forever. And the words felt natural. My brother was so happy for us. I hadn't seen him much since we lived apart, and he was coming to the wedding. I was so excited to see him again. My husband knew he'd be coming, and how important it was for me and my brother to have that quality time together. While catching up, he tells me that he started involving himself with the shelter and the kids there. He tells me that he helps provide not just in funding for the shelter, but is actively involved in the kids' lives to provide guidance and support. Now, they're all good kids, but there's one in particular that stands out to me. He has that inner drive, and he's a hard worker. I can tell he looks up to me. He even calls me Big Bro. He was beaming. I was proud of him. 2 years into the marriage, and we were preparing to welcome a new life. My husband's writing was going well and gaining notoriety. It's because of your advice and support. Thank you always. I love you. He always knew how to make me feel so valued. Our beautiful child was then born. We named her Nicole, and she was full of energy, and we were full of bliss. My life was full with my loving husband and beautiful daughter. One day, I looked in the mirror and noticed that the loneliness and depression that I felt before had somehow disappeared. And so I smiled back at myself in the mirror, full of gratitude for surviving. Nicole grew to be a gentle and intelligent kid before we knew it. My husband and I decided to send her through private school education. The school we found prided itself in raising independent and free-minded children with the perfect balance of academics and athletics and arts. Nicole flourished at the school. My husband and I were also thriving in our careers. By the time Nicole was starting 4th grade, we got some news about my husband. My husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The cancer spread and grew quickly in my seemingly healthy husband. By the time we found out, it was too late for treatment. We arrived together at the hospital, but I went home alone. I was with him, praying to God for any hope that he could recover. But God had other plans. I was terrified because I thought the loneliness would come back. But this time, I have Nicole. I wasn't completely alone, and I had to push through for her. It's different this time. And giving myself that mindset helped me move forward. So my daughter and I continued to live life and lean on each other. My view on life was even more meaningful to me, and I knew never to take a single moment for granted. Then Nicole finished 4th grade and was about to start her final year of elementary school. Having a new teacher and classmates is nerve-wracking, but she knew that she would be okay. By the time the first semester came to an end, I noticed that she stopped talking to me about school altogether. After spring break and the start of the second semester of 5th grade, she was only getting more distant. My main concern was that she wasn't enjoying school or being picked on by other kids. As the second semester came to its end, nothing had changed. Until today. I had to ask her what was going on. I couldn't take it anymore. Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm in the 5th grade. Last year, I lost my dad, and my mom and I were really sad, but my uncle helped us get through it. I'm so glad that my mom was able to grieve and recover. I was so excited to start 5th grade, even though I knew I would have a new teacher and classmates. Well, besides my friend from last year. My teacher told us that he's 28 and in his 6th year of teaching. He gives off like an older, obnoxious brother vibe. My teacher wanted to get to know us as a class and individually, so he had us fill out a little get-to-know-me worksheet. He wanted to interview us based on our answers, one-on-one. He was calling us in alphabetical order, and it was finally my turn. All right, Nicole. So, your favorite subject is English, huh? I like English too. I love to read books. And you also wrote that your dad passed last year, and your mom is raising you as a single mother. I picked up on that tone, and I didn't like it. Just curious, what does your mom do for work? My mother works as a contract employee at a publishing company. After my dad died, my mom quit her full-time position at the company and became a contract employee. I told her that I'm old enough and she didn't need to become a contract employee and she could keep working full-time, but she said she had her own things to do and liked the flexible schedule. Contract employee. You might as well just say you work part-time. How do you guys even afford this school? You must be struggling. Clearly, my teacher assumed we were struggling. Just getting by. It didn't sound like it was coming from a genuine place. As we continued, he said some more weird remarks about our money issues, like he felt bad for me, like we were pathetic. I was honestly triggered by how he was during that talk, so I tried to avoid him as much as I could after that. Didn't matter because he still came up to me. He would come up to me before or after class, knowing I would be alone, and say things like, "Not having enough is stressful, isn't it? Is your mom still working part-time? Are you able to afford tuition for next semester?" I tried my best to ignore him and be the bigger person. I tried to argue back once, tell him I wasn't even poor, but he just continued anyway, so I am better off keeping to myself. He laughs and claims I don't argue back because I know he's right. I was not gonna have my mom involved, so I just stopped talking to her about school altogether. I know mom noticed and started to worry anyway. Over spring break, my teacher assigned us a book to read. He picked a book that he thought everyone would enjoy. The book was a popular novel by an author named Kiri. The main character had a poor and difficult childhood, but eventually overcame his struggles and became successful. My teacher was inspired by this story. After class, he noticed I was alone and he came up to me again. "So, that book starts off with that poor and painful childhood. I'm sure that might hit a few spots since you can relate. And he eventually becomes successful, which is clearly not realistic because life is not a fantasy. I mean, let's be real. Struggle only ever knows struggle. The poor stay poor. It's a cycle. You know, right?" And he just walked away, laughing loudly at himself and sarcastically apologizing that I had to read it. I was so helpless and alone. I couldn't believe I had him as a teacher. I started spring break and was dreading going back to school. I wanted to change my attitude this next semester so that my mom could stop worrying about me. My teacher's attitude didn't change though, and they kept picking on me. I couldn't understand how he just kept taunting me and enjoying it. I just kept ignoring him until one day I snapped back. He wasn't expecting it, but he was speechless, and then he was pissed. He replied, "You rebellious poor kid. I'll remember this," as he was walking away. This is why I should have just ignored him. At the end of the year, there's an annual 5th grade field trip that takes place. Even though it's not even time for the trip yet, everyone is excited for it and starts talking about it in class. The teacher found his way to me again. "School trips are expensive. A big difference compared to public school trips. I wonder if you'll have to sell your house to try and go." "I'm looking forward to going on the trip with everyone. I'll be here. But, it's all good if you can't make it. The trip is a luxury, and for you, the necessities are more important. Don't try too hard to keep up. We all know it's better off if you just stayed home." He even said that it would be better off for the school if I didn't come. He's definitely trying to get his payback for me snapping back, I figured. One day, my classmate had their Nintendo Switch stolen from their book bag and started to question everyone. We weren't even allowed to bring stuff like that to school anyway, but the teacher stated to the class, "There are some kids in this class from poor families who can't even afford to buy a Switch. They might have been jealous and taken it. You never know." He didn't spell it out, but he was implying that I was the one who could have done it, and looked right at me saying it. My friends started to question me. If I tried to stick up for myself, he'd probably say something smart back, like, "I didn't say it was you, but can you not afford a Switch?" So, I just held it all in. Eventually, the Switch was found, but I will never forget how that made me feel. Once it got closer to graduating, we had to talk about our plans for middle school. This time, it was to confirm our classes for middle school, and a separate conference with the parents would be held. At the conference, it started by my teacher suggesting, "So yes, you plan to continue with the same affiliated private school, but you should think about other options." Why? I want to go to middle school with my friends. Your mom must be struggling. Can she really afford the tuition and fees for another 3 years? I think it's better for you and your family to go to a public school that suits your means. If you're poor, you're poor. Stupid to overextend yourself. The teacher continued to be belittling, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I got up from my chair and I slammed the door on the way out. I was crying the entire way home. I was so frustrated with him. When I got home, my mom sat me down to ask me what's been really going on, so I told her the truth. I am literally speechless at what my daughter just told me. I don't even know how to begin to process this. I had no idea my daughter was being harassed at school, and I never thought that it would be her teacher, of all people. And my baby didn't want me to worry, so she kept it all in and dealt with it herself. I hugged my daughter and cried and apologized for her suffering. I had to go to the school and talk to the teacher, immediately. I decided to record our conversation on my phone, just in case. "This is unexpected and sudden. I'd assume you'd be working hard, just as I am." His response only proved my daughter's story more. I asked why he would even have the nerve to say all of the awful things he has said to Nicole. I had to tell her, because she wouldn't have learned otherwise. As a teacher, it's my job. But evidently, you don't realize it for yourself. Look, if you're financially unstable, you should just have her attend public school. I mean, otherwise, it's all for show. I am not financially unstable. We have never had to worry about money in our life. That's a front right there, if I ever heard one. Contract, part-time, whatever, you're struggling, that's for sure. He interrupted me constantly and talked loudly over anything I had to say. It was impossible for me to have a mature conversation with him. His constant immature remarks were pushing me to the edge. I ran out of patience, and I warned him, "That's enough. I've heard enough. Don't ever talk to my daughter like that again, or I will be back, and you will be sorry." I left the room, leaving the teacher speechless. I slammed the door shut, full of anger, but I didn't care for how loud it was. It felt good. After that confrontation, Nicole told me that he did stop talking to her completely. I honestly didn't think that he'd let it go that easily, but nothing happened, and she made it safely to graduation. I ended up not being able to make the student-teacher-parent conference afterwards. Nicole proudly decided to attend the same middle school as her friends, and the teacher laughed at that. The ceremony ended with the school's anthem. I wished that my husband was still alive to witness this moment with me. Then we started socializing with her friends and their mothers to keep in touch. The teacher made his way towards us. "Oh, are the poor and needy enjoying themselves? I tried to suggest public school, but you're selfish. Life must be tough for the lower class of single-parent families. Private schools aren't fit for the poor." He was saying all of this because he knew it would be the last time he'd ever see me. He did not care that everyone was there listening to him. And then an angry voice came from behind. "Joseph! I did not expect that coming from you. You are absolutely not suited to be a teacher." Usually my brother can keep his composure, especially in public, but he was fuming. Kevin! Big bro, what are you doing here?" He was not expecting to see him. "What are you even saying? You, of all people, know the prejudice and struggle of growing up with a single mother and poor upbringing, especially since we both survived the same shelter. How could you be so low to someone when you know exactly how they feel?" Joseph and my brother met at the shelter. Joseph looked up to my brother growing up, and he was there to help him. Joseph considered him a big bro. My brother supported his dreams of becoming a teacher, and it was him who recommended Joseph to this school once he got his teaching degree. He worked in education himself and provided resources for kids to have a bright future in education, thinking it would be their best chance at a bright future. He had a lot of supporters because of his dedication and vision. The school's principal was one of them, so he gladly offered Joseph a teaching position, given my brother's recommendation. I'm here with my sister for my niece's graduation. And Joseph realized that Nicole was his niece. And then he realized I was his sister. I decided it was my turn to give it to him straight. My late husband was a famous writer, and we receive his royalties. We can live comfortably off that alone. But I also have my own steady flow of income. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The author Curie, the book you are inspired by, and the author who you said you were a huge fan of, is actually me. I made the name up, it's a pseudonym. So, you could imagine the sufficient amount I earn from that alone, too. My husband and I enjoyed collaborating, but I wanted to write something for myself, to put into writing the idea that I had for this novel. And he supported my dream, so I started to write. And the more I wrote, the better the writing got. When my husband passed away, I switched my job to a more flexible schedule to focus all of my attention on it. I could have completely stopped working, but I don't mind staying because I value the company. And that's how I could finally finish writing my book. Joseph directly related to the author in the story with his upbringing and childhood. However, Joseph resented his past and pitied single mothers, so he responded by belittling people. He projected his frustration out on my daughter, someone he knew whose mother must have been struggling. But that is not okay to do, especially if you are a teacher. You are not suitable to be a teacher. Do something else. He didn't say anything back, and instead fell on his knees and started to cry in front of everyone. My brother reported him to the principal, and he was fired shortly after that. I provided the principal with some recorded evidence. It was from when I met and confronted Joseph about his behavior. My brother listened to it and was speechless. He said he was disappointed to see that this was who Joseph turned out to be. It'll be difficult for Joseph to continue teaching. Given his attitude and personality, it's doubtful he'll even last in the profession. I made a bad judgment call there. I had no idea. Hey, don't worry. People like that are rare. Otherwise, this world would be completely doomed. I hope I never grow up to be like that. What a teacher. My brother laughed. And hey, you should start focusing on your happiness. I promise I'm happy, and you don't have to worry about me anymore. Start dating! What are you talking about? You could also start dating yourself and be even happier. As long as she's happy, I'm happy. But a new dad? My daughter, wise beyond her years. She is my happiness. What is it that makes us feel so alone? Is it just in our heads? Or is it because we close our hearts off and choose not to see the beautiful things right in front of us? I know the answer is only found by looking deep inside the heart.